Hello, good afternoon, good evening. Okay, so I had to do a follow-up video to a follow-up response to the teacher, Mr. Henry Abramson. Again, firstly, I need to apologize because I didn't actually finish watching the entirety of what I believe is like latest 17-minute video. And so I got about maybe halfway before I ended up making my first response video to it. And now that I just finished watching it a moment ago, I almost got goosebumps because you'd think this was planned somehow, but this is the power and connection us Jews have with one another, I think. Which is to say that we are intertwined psychically somehow, on a universal level, beyond something I could even comprehend. You got into the four sons and the four questions. I had no idea that that's where it was heading, and you bring up the important point of the wise one talking about etchem, which is inclusive, meaning he's referring to himself as part of the collective, whereas the wicked son is referring to himself as separate, lechem. And so this distinction in the letters and the words in Hebrew means everything. And I think that it reminds me of something I learned back in college from another rabbi who, sorry, I didn't mean to say another as in additional to you. I know you've said you're not a rabbi, but a teacher nonetheless. But a rabbi in college introduced me to this, this idea that, God is so distant and yet so present all at once. It's really this interesting phenomenon, and in there it's as if God is in the details of everything. So to point that out and to make we have to zoom in, right, so closely to find that, to locate that. But in doing so, we kind of uncover a little piece of God, if you will. So I thought that was really interesting, and the fact that you got to talking about the four sons was like, yeah, almost goosebumps inducing. So that was pretty cool. And also in response, I did want to just add, I think what you're highlighting and I think what you're getting to is the exact point, which really exists within a paradoxical realm. And bear with me if you will. What I mean to say is that the students that you're addressing, I think that those students are very few and far between. They're students like myself. And let me tell you a story to kind of enlighten, in case this is something that's unfamiliar to you, but it probably isn't. And then I'll go on and conclude with a point. So about 10 years ago, I was co-hosting an event on college campus where I was going. And this is back in California, very liberal, progressive, yada, yada. And so it was an event to hear from these two young Israeli former soldiers, one who was originally from Ethiopia and talked about her journey from Ethiopia as a young girl, and then moving to Israel, serving in the army and so forth. And the other was a young man from Israel talking about his experiences. And when you host these events, you get used to picking out who's going to be the one to interrupt and make a scene. And so not, 15 minutes into this event, which was in total about an hour long, maybe 45 minutes, one particular individual who I had become very familiar with because he was one of the, he was just a tall guy and just had that presence about him, like he wanted to draw attention to himself. And so he stands up and immediately starts shouting over the speakers and has a banner and, of course, the usual bandana, keffiyeh, or mock keffiyeh, whatever he's wearing. And other than just shouting, yelling, saying things that may have been true, probably were exaggerated as far as numbers when they were talking about, at this time, this was following the 2014, it was like that 50-day campaign in Gaza following the kidnapping and murder of the Israeli teenagers over like mid-July to August. This was, 10 years ago. So yeah, naturally people were upset over that. So it wasn't the best time to be in college because, of course, now was probably the worst time to be in college. But before today, 10 years ago, that was definitely one of many worst times to be in college because, Jews who have nothing to do with Israel are now having to somehow come to the defense of a country that's thousands of miles away, and in some cases many people haven't been to. I had been there. I'd been there at that point twice, and so I knew what it was like to run into the bomb shelters because this was I was there during this, right at the start of that war, the 50-day war in Gaza. And so sirens were going off probably about half the time during my 2.5 week stay. And in Jerusalem, I took shelter 2 or 3 times. And I was lucky. I didn't feel scared because I trust in the Israeli technology. It's superior to most. So I felt fine, but I also recognized the reality of if a bomb happened to, God forbid, land on the shelter or wherever, and we all died, Hamas doesn't give a shit. So, and neither did a lot of these protesters. So that's the point I want to get to is I think you make a mistake, and I'm not saying this to be insulting in any way. I'm just wanting to be practical about this. I think you make actually a huge mistake when you think as though some of these individuals are actually going to listen to what you or I have to say. They're not interested in conversation. They're not even interested in education. If they were, and here's the paradox, then they wouldn't even be a part of these groups because this is so antithetical to everything you and I and other Jewish people who actually have, some foundation and some values within their bodies. That's, this is what we stand for. And if these people actually stood for those things, then yes, in this case, it is black or white. It is binary, absolutely. We're talking about, look how black or white it is. You put one flag against another, that's as black or white as you get, right? How often in other cultures or in other parts of what we call the world stage, are we constantly pinning two particular groups against one another as though this is the most intractable thing on planet Earth. There's nothing intractable about it. Israel is going to exist. Done, period, end of story. And, people have to get over that. And if they can't, then that's their problem. And if the way that they need to cope with that is to draw attention to themselves, to harass other students, bully, and cause violent acts, well then guess what? They don't have a place in free societies because that's not how you behave in a free-thinking society that actually promotes things like conversation and healthy dialogue and discussion and debate. These are not debaters. These are not people who you would want to go and hang out and, get a beer or a glass of wine with or smoke a joint with. These are people who need to get the F out of here because they serve no darn purpose other than to just cause disturbances. And so I think that is ultimately the trap that we can fall in when we think about the possibility that students will somehow, the lights will turn on in their heads and they'll look at you and actually be receptive and they'll shut their mouths and they'll listen. They're not really capable of that because if they were, again, there's the paradox, they wouldn't be in this scenario that they have created and self-imposed. It's completely self-imposed. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. And really, so interesting the fact that, we were both actually thinking about the 4 sons. So yeah, very interesting. So thank you again for all you do, and take care.